see, setting up live meeting.
So it'll pop up on your show.
Yeah. Okay. Here we are. Well, hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Laughter for All podcast. I get them mixed up because I have a show every night called Live with Naz, but welcome to the Laughter for All podcast. This is episode number 67. This is comedian Nazareth, and I'm excited to introduce my guest, a friend of mine, and he's a very, very funny guy. We've known each other for over 20 some years, and let me introduce him officially. He's from Texas, and he is, as a novice jokester, Smiley honed his talents as the merch managing MC for bands like Newsboys, Third Day, and Mercy Me. 20 years later, Bob is now one of the nation's most in demand and hilarious screen comedians. And I remember when I used to do festivals, he was the MC all the time, and a job that we didn't want to do as comedians because you're at Creation or at Spirit West Coast. It was like 10,000 teenagers, 12 to 15, 16 years old, and no comic wants to go before them, but Bob Smiley just makes them laugh so hard and they love him. And it's just amazing to see this man at work. Bob, welcome. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, man. Yeah, those back in the day, yeah, a lot of comics would not do anything like MC festivals or do any kind of youth event. They were scared of kids. But I was very fortunate that I had this thing called bills that needed to be paid. So
Oh, yeah. I
really
heard about that.
encouraged me to answer God's calling to go out and take every junior high lock-in at 4 a.m. in the morning, right after the shaving cream fight, get up and hey, waka waka waka, and really kind of hone my craft, if you will.
I did a lot, and I mean, early on, I did a lot of youth events where I was teaching the comedy, teaching the message the whole week, spending the whole week. But to put them in a festival, and then to have like they're waiting for the newsboys, and then you have a comedian go in before that,
Yeah.
that's hard. And you did it beautifully. So
And outdoors, like it was, when I started, I did not know how to be a comedian. I was just like, it was baptism by fire. I kind of just fell into it as a career. And so I remember standing at 9 a.m. at Atlanta Fest on the stage trying to, because there were smatterings of people. It wasn't even
yes.
bigger, but it was in a field that would hold 60,000 people. And you would see a guy way up on the hill throwing a Frisbee, and he would stop and turn and go, and you couldn't hear him laugh, but you'd see him go, just like just move his head enough that you're like, okay, he thought that was funny. Now, if we had people here, it would be a great show. But yeah, it was grueling. But all that to say, if Atlanta Fest is still happening, I'm available to MC.
Well, what happened is you played the guitar, and that really helped a lot because sometimes just going up on a main stage like
I
that and
did
just
play the
talking.
guitar. Do you think I'm Tim Hawkins?
You you carried the guitar.
I carried the amps, which is how I got into the festival. That's
No,
yeah.
but didn't you use? I saw you once. I don't know. I think it's Spirit West Coast, but you had a guitar on, and so that's
I
how
love
I
the
knew.
research you've done for this show. It's very, very
I do,
professional.
I do, I
Yeah,
do.
I've
So
never played the guitar. I did tour with a guy named Riley Armstrong, and he played the guitar. And sometimes in the middle of the show, I would get bored, not from my own act, but just like I would get distracted, I guess is a better word. And so a
mhm.
couple times, and I did this with Hawkins too. I would pick up the guitar as I was telling a story, and I'd put the guitar on like I was about to play, and then I would go, if I can get serious for a second, guys, I really wish I'd learned how to play the guitar. And then I just take it off and set it back down and then just go back to Max. So
Maybe
maybe
that's
that's
the
the
time
thing.
when I saw that bit,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's one. Let me ask you this. Okay, you started 20 some years ago, and at the end of 2019, the end of normal life as a comedian for all of us. Were you envisioned yourself when you first started? Were you at that level? Are you beyond or less, or it wasn't? You weren't even close. Where were you?
As far as my career plan,
Yes.
well, I never thought I'd be a comedian in the first place. For the in case there's listeners that don't know, I did a stand-up competition in college for the prize money and never thought it would be a career. It wasn't something I was pursuing, and I won. Not even because I was good, but everybody else was terrible. And this guy saw me. He went out to Nashville to start road managing bands and stuff, and he was road managing a guy named Clay Cross, and they were talking
Wow.
about how they wanted a comedian to entertain the crowd in between the acts and keep the show rolling and stuff. And this guy tracked me down because he had seen me do that one stand-up competition in college, which I honestly did for the money, just for the cash prize. And I loved comedy, and I had an appreciation, but I never thought I would be able to do it. And so he called me up, and he was like, "Do you want to go on tour?" And I remember I pulled over at a Cracker Barrel payphone because he had paged me. And I was like, everything about that sentence is so old. Like, if young kids are watching right now, they're probably Googling like crazy, like pager, payphone, what is all this? And I called him from a Cracker Barrel payphone, and he was like, "Do you want to go on tour with us?" And I was like, "Okay." So then a year and a half later, I am standing on the stage opening for the Newsboys and in front of, 7,000 people. So I never envisioned any of that. So at the end of 2019, I'm still in awe that people call and ask me to come to their church, and that people show up and buy tickets to come to my show. Like it still has not worn off, that this adrenaline rush of, wow, this is really happening. I think Billy Crystal actually said that comedians, they feel phony for a long time, and they're always afraid that the comedy police are going to come and arrest you for being a phony. And I felt like that for years. But even now that I'm established and been doing stuff for forever, I still, when I get on stage, I'm like, oh my goodness, it's still working. Like, the people are still fooled that I'm a comedian.
You know what, Bob? I've never heard any comedian say that. And it's true because we feel the same way. Like when I'm ready to go on stage and it's a big audience, I go, man, you know what? I know I'm good enough to do this. I know I have enough. I know I'm going to do great. And then the back of my mind, I hope they never find out I'm a phony,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
I'm not really funny. I'm just doing this and it worked. You're right. We have
yeah.
that feeling. Even
Speaking of talking about other comedians, I want to address something, because when you called me yesterday about what 8 p.m. and was like, "Hey, can you do my show tomorrow?"
uh,
Yeah, you sent me a list of all the people who had been on it, and I was like,
and they
"Oh,
all got a call a day before.
well, okay." But here's what I'm wondering. I'm like, how many people has he called before he even thought of me? And the list was, I read the list. It was Shonda Pierce, then Mark Lowry. And I'm thinking, okay, Ken Davis, Jeff Allen. So I'm reading the list going, well, he wanted to have them on, because they're old and who knows how much longer they have. And then I saw Brad Stein and Robert G. Lee, and I was like, okay, same still. And then it said, and many more. How many more before you actually called me? We've been friends for over like 15 years at least. Like,
There's something called, out of sight, out of mind. And when some of my fans on the live with Naz said, "Oh yeah, Bob Smiley," and I go, "Bob Smiley." So I called you. That's how it
okay.
is. And I tell
So
you
so
what,
people suggested me. So it wasn't that
well,
I
they
was
didn't suggest you for the podcast. They were mentioning how funny you are, or we are talking about something and said, "Yeah, Bob Smiley does a bit about that," and that's when I went, Bob Smiley. That's what it. Let me
okay.
ask you this. This is left field.
So
Uh,
what, but it wasn't that you thought Bob was like bottom of barrel, like the very
no, no,
last
no, no, no. There's still
on.
a lot more people I'm going to call. There's a lot of people that actually working on New Year's Eve that we're not, but I'm going to call them.
Yeah,
But no, no, it's not that. It just, and I'm like, I'm ADD kind of sometimes. So sometimes I plan the
sometimes.
podcast the day before or 2 days before, and I would call the person and say, "Hey, can you do it?" And it's always last minute, but hey, it works. This is how we work. Let me ask you this. One time, a few years ago, we were talking, and I think, it was there was like I think it was 2008, 2009 when the economy crashed, and I
Hmm.
was calling you and said, "How you doing, Bob? How financially?" I always like to check on comics. How you doing financially? Do you need any help or anything? And you told me that you're very smart and frugal
Hmm.
with your stuff. So one guy sent me this question, Chris Rossetti. You probably know him.
Oh, I know
Mm,
Chris.
I
He's a
never
great dude.
I should have never mentioned his name, but he said, please ask Bob if he still collects ketchup packets from restaurant and has the pandemic forced him to buy shampoo and soap since he's not staying in hotels like he used to.
Okay, there's so much I want to say about that question. That's a great question. I when I first started, and I started with Clay Cross, and then I was on tour with the Newsboys for about a year, and I
Mhm.
was a starving single, comic out there, not making hardly any money. And so I survived by going in the green room when the Newsboys would get on the tour bus and just cleaning out the green room with all the food, condiments. And then I'd go back to my little apartment in Nashville. And so I had ketchup packages and had all that stuff. And I never had to buy all that. And I've always gotten the shampoo and the toilet paper out of the hotels because we pay for it. So but it's always, my wife and I have had strong disagreements about whether that's ethical and stuff like that. But when this pandemic hit, I got an extra hug because we had a room full of toilet paper, we had toiletries, we had cleaning stuff. Like, it was the cleaning supplies I probably shouldn't have taken from the hotel because I did have to get into the janitor's room. But the point is, you'll edit this, right? The point is, I did provide for my family. But Chris brings up a great point. So everything shut down in March. That's actually when I
Uh,
started growing this beard coming
oh,
on.
I can see it.
Yeah, what you need a better computer. It's
I know.
really thick. But we started running out of toilet paper and stuff about June, and I had to go buy it. And of course, it was hard to find, and
Right.
you had to go to a gas station bathroom with screwdriver and to be able to get it.
I, I have relatives who complain about this because they own service stations, Middle Eastern people, and they're like, "Oh, these guys are still taking." But let me see. What advice do you have for people, like a legitimate saving advice that people can save money now because everybody in this pandemic are, their income is less. Do you do something you feel that this is a great way to save money?
One thing I do is this is going to be a serious answer because I am very frugal. I'm very financial because let's admit it, Naz. We're in an uncertain career as it is. Take
Right.
away the pandemic and all that stuff. We never know when our next paycheck's coming in. Come to
Right.
find out, it's going to be probably 2022. So I guess we do know. That's when my next show is. What were we talking about before I started crying?
Before you started crying, I don't want to bring it back up so you don't cry more. What legitimate advice, or not a trick, but a little, what do you call it, thing that you do saving money that would help people?
Oh, do we really need it? We see things all the time, and the world is competing for our attention and our money. And the world is, like we are nothing but consumers. And so
Mm.
everybody's trying to get you to consume their product, whether it's, stuff that you go in the grocery store and there's end caps to make you think, oh, I could use that. I could. And I think people will $10 or $20 themselves into bankruptcy because they're just buying a little, oh, it's no big deal. I'll just throw that in the basket. Well, that adds up so quickly. If you actually look at your budget and see what all did you spend money on, there's things that you obviously have to spend money on, food, stuff at bobsmiley.com,
Right.
you want to tithe and, all that kind of stuff. Should have mentioned tithe before my website. I feel bad now.
I
Uh,
would still, no, I would, biblically, I would go with your website first.
you are a
So
God
that's more
man.
than, they need to spend more than 10%. So I would go with that first.
Yeah. Yeah. So actually, you'll appreciate this because we used to go to places where there would be a
Used to.
merch fee where
Yes.
you could sell your merch, but they took a percentage of your.
Yeah, for the venue.
I remember talking to a theater one time and I was trying to negotiate and they wanted 25%. And I told the guy, I said, God only takes 10%. How can you take 25%? And he wasn't a Christian. And he was like, God doesn't own this theater.
That's a good answer. Yeah,
So,
that's fun.
but no, I think it comes down to what do we really need in life?
Mhm.
What do we really need? I say that as my desk is full of stuff that I probably didn't need Batman duct tape. Like regular duct tape probably would have been as good. I don't like. I got a puzzle. I got a puzzle that I made.
Are you into Batman?
I'm a little into Batman.
How little?
Um, quite a
Okay.
bit, quite a
This
bit.
man is telling us you don't need a lot of things, but
You don't
I
need a lot
got
of things,
Batman this.
but
I got, but you need Batman puzzle and Batman duct tape. I have
the
MacGyver's duct
Batman
tape. That
puzzle,
works better.
yeah, the Batman puzzle was $1.50, but even that was a thing of like, do I need this? Yes, I do. I'm going to be doing Christmas with my in-laws, my family, everybody's going to be together. So I probably need a puzzle to to go
Keep him
sneak
quiet.
away for. And so, but no, in all seriousness though, I do think we are in the me generation where we think we deserve everything. And so we just
Mm.
see it and we're like, boom, boom, boom. And debt is a big deal. I've always been very anti-debt, and, just what is our basic needs? And then if there's stuff left over, we can, use it. Ultimately, as Christians, we want to use that leftover stuff to help other people. But, also, maybe we do want wasabi peas instead of just regular peas.
Oh, they make those. Oh,
Oh, they're so good.
I know. I
So
need to get
good.
them, but
I
now
some
that
Yeah, somebody
I don't
sent
need
those
them.
to me, so I didn't
Oh,
actually pay for those.
and what do you have on your mug? What is it? What is that? Is that
Oh, it's
Batman?
Gonzo. I'm a
Guns.
big Muppet. If the Muppets ever make a Batman movie,
You're in.
I am
You're done.
camping out. Like, yeah.
Okay, let me ask you this: if you were not a comedian, what else would you do? What else would you been doing?
I'm pretty good at mowing lawns. Um, I know that's a joke. I mean, it sounds like a joke, but it's not. My brother and I mowed lawns like my whole high school career. And at one point we were mowing like 34 lawns, and we had a cemetery, we had the community center, and it was great. We would get up and we would mow lawns all day long. We made lots of money. We were outdoors. We were in control of our own, time limit. The harder we worked, the more we were rewarded, and I think that was great. It sounds like a bit, and I have done this bit, but it's all true. We called it Smiley Brothers Mowing Company, and our motto was, "We give you mower for your money." And we put a little like sign up, and I grew up in a very, very small town, so we only had one store, and so we put a little ad up, that said, "We give you mower for your money." And every like widow that had a little farmhouse loved us. And so we would go, and I'd sit on the porch and negotiate the price, and then we would mow and help clean up around the house, and all that kind of extra stuff. And it was great. I loved it. So I'm good at mowing. During the pandemic, when all of my shows canceled, I got really into a video game called Uber Eats driving. And
Oh,
yeah, it's phenomenal. Like, you get a destination on your phone, you get in the car, it's like Grand Theft Auto. You get to you get the food, and then you go and try to deliver it. A lot of it is in apartment complexes, so you're going up and down stairs. It's like Donkey Kong. And if it's in a rural area, it's more like Red Dead Redemption than Grand Theft Auto.
yes,
But
I
you know
played both.
yes, yes, yes. But no, I don't know. I mean, I've been Uber Eats driving, anything to, bring money in that I can.
Right.
I'm still doing a bunch of stuff related to comedy, and I do have a couple of shows coming up. I already mentioned 2022, so I don't think I need to promote that early.
Uh, uh, how do you, as a comedian, you get shows and then they cancel? I'm not talking pandemic. How do you deal with disappointments? I know whenever we get a big show, our hopes gets up and we get excited and go, "Oh, this is gonna open doors for this and all that."
Yeah.
How do you deal with disappointments?
Well, I've been doing this long enough to know that no one show is ever going to make us. I used to get so nervous the first like 2 years that I started comedy. If I had a radio interview, and I would have to get up at like 4 in the
4 in
morning.
the morning,
Yeah,
yes.
and I'd be sitting there, next to my landline, and I'd be practicing my bits and be like, okay, I got to be energetic. Thinking that this one radio interview was going to catapult. I was going to be flooded. Sit back and watch, my MySpace fill up with fans and all this kind of stuff. And I, through just years of doing that, I realized like no one interview, especially not this one, no show is going to make or break your career. So when shows do cancel, and I've been very fortunate, I've only had 2 shows that I couldn't make because of flights or, travel stuff.
Mm.
I've only 2 shows that I had to call and cancel because of that. Never had to cancel because of illness. And only a couple of shows before the pandemic has actually canceled because of something out of my control beforehand. But when the quarantine hit, I had a show with Bob Goff, who is
Oh yeah.
my wife and I's favorite author. We actually did get to go meet him one time and kind of hang out a little bit, but this was going to be a big, huge show, and I was going to get to like hang out pretty much all day with Bob Goff. And then it was right at the end of March, maybe beginning of April, and that one canceled. And that one hurt just because I was like, man, and I'd done so much prep work. I'd made videos promoting this big thing and all that kind of stuff. So that one kind of hurt just from a selfish standpoint of I just want to hang out with Bob Goff.
Yeah, I did a show and I did actually a retreat with him in Arizona. We spent 3 days, but hardly saw him. He goes back to his room. But yeah, it's hard. So what do you call it? When you were doing comedy and you were on the road and then you and well, let me tell you something about what you just shared earlier about there's not one show that will make or break your career. Many years ago, myself, Brad Stein, and Jeff Allen did a show called Life Today with Robinson, yeah, James Robinson. And every week they played one of the comedians, and they played Brad Stein. And then I called Brad Stein. And if Brad is watching or listening, I mean, I'm sharing it openly and I'll share it with him. He called him. I said, how was it? He goes, man, the phone did not stop ringing. It was great. Hundreds of calls. It's going to be great. And the next week, it was my show. And man, I got up at 4 in the morning. I told everybody in the house, do not do anything. Do not touch the phone. I was just sitting ready for the calls. And I go, guys, get a piece of paper and pen, because when it rings, I'm going to take the number and we're going to talk and we're going to book. And you put the calendar. Here's the calendar. Just when I ask you about a date, you tell me. No one called.
Yeah.
No one called. And many years later, of course, Brad is like a mentor. I love Brad. We spend a lot of time together. Love him. And I said, Brad, do you remember? He goes, no, not many calls. It's like, ah. I was like, I feel better now, because I thought, like, why wouldn't they call him? I mean, if they call hundreds, so many calls for Brad and for the other, why wouldn't they call me? And it's right. You cannot depend on one show.
Yeah, and a lot of that is like timing. If they all, if there was a bunch of people looking to book events and they turned it on and they see Brad and they book those events, well, then next week maybe there's not that big a deal. I don't know. Jeff Allen had his Dry Bar comedy special came out before mine, like 6 months before mine, and of course his exploded, and like they could not keep up with the phone calls of people. Well,
Right.
so mine was getting ready to come out, and I was having kind of a slow year in 2019, and so I thought, oh, and I talked to Jeff. He and I actually did a thing at the Houston Improv together, and I was like, what was it like? And it was the same thing. He was like, I'm booked solid for the rest of the year. And I was like, bring it on. And my Dry Bar came out, and it got good views and great ratings and all this. Yeah. And I just kept just sitting there like, hello, no, I would not like to change my phone service. I got to get off. I'm about to be booked. Like, hello, no, I don't. Okay, Marriott Rewards, thank you. Like it was nothing. So you just never know, man. You never know.
That's actually the same thing.
This kind of goes with it, though. I think God is totally in control and can use us all in different ways, and we have to be willing to accept that. You just remind me of Brad Stein's story. So I'd been doing stand-up for about 6 or 7 years, maybe, and I feel like I was getting, good at it, and I feel like I was making a name, and my show date calendar was full, and it was really starting to work. And then all of a sudden, Brad Stein just exploded on the scene.
I remember that.
Yeah, and he was doing the what was the men's conference thing?
The God Man.
Yeah, it wasn't that. It was something.
Put a helmet on? No.
Oh, he did the put the helmet on thing was out, but he was man, what was it? It doesn't matter. But there was a big men's conference where he was traveling around, and even to this day, people still come up and say, "I saw you."
Oh, the Promise Keepers.
Promise Keepers.
Yeah. I remember.
I still had people come up and say, "I saw you at Promise Keepers," and I was like, "Nope, that was I." And now I don't even correct them. I'm just like, "Yep, that was me. I was playing the guitar." I just let them, think what they want to think. But Brad Stein showed up at, it was Cincinnati, Ohio. It was called Kings Island. And I was
Yes.
emceeing, but I still was feeling like I'm an established comedian and all that. Brad breezed in. He went up. He did a 35-minute set about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So it was starting to fill up. Like the Timberwolf Arena holds 10,000 people. And there was maybe like 7,000 people there. He just walks in, walks on stage, kills, and walks off. But as he's killing, I'm just watching him thinking, well, my career's over with. Like now there's a new guy who obviously is better than me. He's been doing it longer. He knows what he's doing. And he walked off, and there was a rapper that was supposed to follow him, and the rapper didn't show up yet. And so the stage manager came to me and he was like, we don't, I'm trying not to say the rapper's name, but I'll make up a name. T-Bone didn't show up. And so I hope T-Bone's not listening, but he didn't show up. And so the stage manager said to me, like, will you go out and do some time? And I was like, okay. And I went out and I did like 25 minutes right after Brad killed. And the lesson I learned from that is there's enough room for everybody.
Exactly. It doesn't matter.
He wasn't taking laughs that I no longer could get. He was giving laughs, and then I got to go out and give more laughs. Like there was, not a finite amount of laughs that could happen that night. And it was really, it was very educational to me at the time as a upcoming comedian who just was feeling like he was starting to get going. I was like, oh, okay, there's plenty of room for us.
Yes, you're right. That's a great lesson to comedians or newer comics. Do not worry who you follow. It doesn't matter. It's you, people want to see you. They want to know who you are. If you're original, you're doing great. Have you ever at one point said, I'm quitting comedy? That's it. I'm not going to do it.
I actually quit one night. It was kind of a cool story, but it was really bad. So I was on tour with the Supertones.
I remember them.
Yeah. So I done Claycross tour. I did the Newsboys tour. And then I got the Supertones picked me up. And so now I'm standing in warehouses with no chairs. And it's like 800 youth group kids, and not even youth group kids, like kids from, non-Christian kids. Like it was a huge and it was a mosh pit. And, it was like this big deal. So it was very hard to get anybody to listen to me. And so we were doing this tour, and we had this show. There was a big youth conference in Dallas called Winterfest, which I've since done a lot. But at the time, I think it was like 3,000 or 4,000 youth kids, like youth group kids. And we got booked. But what I didn't know was the manager of the Supertones booked the Supertones at Winterfest, but added me on as a package deal. So nobody knew me. So they didn't really want me, but they booked me because that was the tour coming in. And so I'm there and I'm getting excited because a lot of guys that I graduated with were now youth ministers, and they were at this thing. It was like predominantly a Church of Christ type deal, which is, I went to Church of Christ school and Church of Christ church. And so all of a sudden, all these guys that I went to college with was going to get to see me open for the Supertones. Well, I get there and there was 4 hours of speakers, like almost back to back. And then at 10 o'clock that night, it just said Supertones concert. And I was like, I'd been on tour with them enough to know, like, this is not going to be good if they're all expecting the Supertones. And so I talked to the guys and they were like, no, we'll make it clear. We'll make it clear that like you have a set time and you're part of the tour and all that. And I was like, okay. And so we're getting ready to go. Now the kids are worn out because they've sat through, 4 speakers. And we're getting ready to go on, and the guy turns to me, and I was supposed to do either 15 or 20 minutes. And he turns to me and he goes, hey, we're kind of running behind, which we weren't, because it was like 9:55. And he was like, so we only need 5 minutes from you. And so I'm still young enough comic to be like, I don't know how to
do 5 minutes.
I had planned 20 minutes. How do I, and so I'm trying to do that. And I was like, okay, just make sure that they know I'm on tour with them, and that, and he was like, yeah, no problem. And so he walks out and he goes, are you guys ready for the Supertones? And everybody, all these kids, woo! And they were like, but first, first we have a guy Uh, please welcome Bob. Doesn't say my full name. Doesn't say I'm a comedian. Doesn't say
Comedian.
anything. And I walk out. We may need to edit this part, but we walk out and it's just dead quiet. Like nobody wants to see me. And I can actually see some of my friends that I'd graduated from just looking like, oh. And
Yeah.
one kid down front, pardon the language, but this is actually what he said. He goes, "You suck." And I didn't know it. Like I just go, "Yes, I do. Absolutely, I do." But I now have 4.5 minutes, and I'm going to tell you about my grandmother, and then I'll bring up the supertones, and I just start slinging jokes, like just hoping, and
What?
nobody's
Yeah.
listening. But every once in a while, somebody would like you would hear all these people murmur and stuff, and then you'd hear people like start to laugh, and then start to laugh and start, and so by the end, getting right up close to the 5 minutes, I actually kind of had the audience, but not enough. And then all of a sudden the supertones in the background, Dan started blowing
Ah.
the trumpet up. He wasn't doing it to be mean because he's a super sweet dude, but they heard that horns, and then all of a sudden they start chanting the supertones again. And I walked off, and I had to walk off stage, and not I couldn't go backstage, so I had to walk down. And one of the guys
Oh.
I graduated with was standing over the corner, and he just looked at me and he goes, "Wow, so that's what you do?" And I just felt terrible. And I went into the back, the green room, and I called my manager and I told him, I was like, "I'm done. It's not working out. This tour has been grueling. Nobody wants to hear me. I don't think I'm funny." And I quit, but he said, "Finish out the tour and then you can quit. But just go ahead and finish out the tour," which was smart because he knew that if he got me to get back on the bus and go out and keep doing it, I was going to have good nights and realize like, oh, okay, I'm doing good. So I hung up, but I was done. I was like completely done. And one of my heroes growing up was a speaker named Jeff Walling. And
Oh, I know Jeff Walling.
you know Jeff Walling?
He
Oh man,
is right now. Actually, I played table tennis with him at one of the conferences. He is right now one of the pastors at Shepherd of the Hills. Is that correct? Are
I
we talking about the same guy?
think so.
In the Valley in California.
He's a speaker also. He like
Yeah,
travels
yeah. He
yeah,
has a beard, Jeff Walling. Yeah.
yeah. So growing up, he was like the Church of Christ speaker, and he put out these funny videos and all this kind of stuff. And so I remember sitting in the green room, and it was dark, and I was just miserable, and I was thinking how I was never going to get on stage again. But I promised my manager I'd finish the tour, and all of a sudden I hear this voice, and he's like, "Hey, you Bob Smiley?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Man, my kids really like you." And I look up, and it's Jeff Walling, and I'm like,
Oh.
"What? Jeff." And so I ended up like sitting there and talking to him, and he was so encouraging, and just, he was one of my heroes. And you're not supposed to meet your heroes, but if Jeff Walling is your hero, meet him because he's just an amazing dude. And it really encouraged me just to, you get back out there and do it. So to answer I know you asked a simple question. I'm giving you a plot, but
No, that's good. I wanted to hear that.
but
Let
I
me ask you,
quit. Yeah, I
you quit
quit.
for a day.
I quit for a day. Yeah.
And that's
And
what
then,
makes you a great comic, Bob, because you know what? And I kind of relate to this because like I do stadiums and I do a festival. My road wasn't just a comedy club where everybody is watching, listening, it's dark, and it's just you talking.
mm,
You always have to fight my way to get my jokes out. There's
mhm.
always that, there's people like, 20 feet away sitting on lawn chairs that you need to make laugh. So I know it's hard work. Let
I
me ask
remember
you this.
doing I remember doing a festival. Sorry to cut you off, but you just
No, you're
reminded me
not.
of
You're not. This is
one of
your
my
show.
favorite.
I'm about the guest.
This is one of my worst but favorite memories. Was I was doing stand up, and I want to say it was maybe 9:30 in the morning or maybe 10 o'clock at an outdoor festival, and the only people there were people that were putting on sumo wrestling suits and wrestling. They had a little pit over the side. So I literally walked to the side of the stage, and I'm doing stand up for these people that are wrestling, that are in these big inflatable suits and hitting. And every once in a while they'd hit, one of them, and look up and go, "Good one." You know, it was, yeah. See, we just get these impossible, terrible shows, but I think it makes us stronger.
Oh yeah, then the next day you go do a big audience that's listening to you at a church, and you're just like, this is a piece of cake.
Oh yeah,
Right.
I did a gig. So my one of my roommates in college, he was a youth minister in a very affluent part of town in outside of Dallas, and he could not get his youth kids to get involved or get passionate about doing anything. He couldn't even get them to come up to the youth room to hang out. Their idea of a fun youth activity was to, fly to Vail and go snow skiing or, something big. And he was like, man, I'm trying to get this community, and, kids just, because they're so wealthy, it's just hard to get a hold of their heart. And so he asked me if I'd come to a show for him. And he's like, I don't know how many people are going to be there. And so my parents were living up there at the time. So I went and I visited them. I went to do the show. There were 8 kids, just 8 kids. So I put them all on a couch. I stood in front of 8 kids. I did an hour show. And then I drove all night so I could get on a plane in Houston and fly out to Spirit West Coast so I could do a late night event. And I'd been doing Spirit West Coast so much that I kind of did have a pretty good following. So the late night tent shows were great
Yes.
because, like,
I love them. I love those.
yes.
Yeah.
So I remember doing a show for 8 people one night, driving all night, getting on a plane, flying out to Spirit West Coast. They had to roll the sides of the tent up, and there was over 2,000 people in there. And I did the same show for 2,000, and the night before I was doing 8. So that's what comedy is like.
That's
You
what comedy
never
is all
know.
about.
Yeah.
Okay, before I ask you the next question, I have a question from one of my audience members on the live with Naz. She said, I have a couple questions that I need you to ask Bob today. It's important to let him know that they are from the Vosses, Becky and Pat Voss.
Oh yeah, we might want to censor those.
Yes. How old are you?
Yeah, we
No,
definitely
you
need
don't
to
have to
censor those.
answer.
Yeah.
You don't. Okay, what's your middle name?
Oh wow. So yeah. Hold on, I'm just gonna take Becky off my Christmas card list. Right there. My age, I'm 21. And
Okay, me
my
too.
middle name is.
Oh, it froze. Sorry, Becky. Sorry, guys.
Anyway,
We
that's
have to get
and
back.
that's how I got my middle name.
I
Also,
loved
I
it.
usually
I
don't tell
heard
that
it, but
part
I
of the
don't think
story.
people heard it. But
Oh,
that's a long middle name.
yeah, it
That's
is
too
very
many
like.
vowels.
Did it freeze? My neighbor's Wi-Fi is not good, so I'm
Yes.
sorry if that
No,
cut
it's
out.
okay. I heard it.
Okay,
It's okay. So tell me, is Smiley is your real name?
it's my real last name. Yes.
Of course, you were doing lawn and putting Smiley, so that tells me that it was a real name. Okay. Well, there
Actually, really,
one.
really quick, Naz, because you'll appreciate this. Because I don't know, did you get nervous when you first started doing radio interviews and stuff?
Yes, I always get nervous about anything that I think is gonna make my career grow.
Yeah. I remember the first radio interview I ever did. It was for Radio U. I think it was in Columbus, Ohio, but
Hmm.
it was a big station. And the first question they asked me was, "Is Smiley your real last name?" Well, I just started doing comedy, and Smiley had been my last name forever. And so my first thing I ever said on radio was, "Yeah, Smiley's my last name. Why would I change it to?" Oh yeah, I guess I see. And I just sounded like a moron, like I didn't know what I was doing. But yeah, it is my last name.
That's a perfect name for a comedian. Now, let's see. And enjoy their daughter Sarah asked me this: what do you do with the gifts from fans, such as a very large black coffee mug with a yellow smiley face on it?
Oh, oh no, I still have that. They gave me this big, huge mug that they had painted smiley face on it, and but it is upstairs right now. We are using it to we're doing some watercolor paint stuff, and so we're
Mm,
actually using it for that because I'm no longer allowed to fill it with coffee. My wife
yeah.
made that rule.
So you're not drinking coffee anymore?
I'm still drinking coffee, but out of a small mug.
But yeah, the Muppets.
Yeah.
Another question: what is it like having a wife who is funnier than you? I can answer that.
Did you? Yeah. I kind of feel like that's a question for Hawkins. Next, no, my wife is incredibly funny. She's so funny, and you and I were talking about this off the air, but that's really why we started our podcast, Hook, Line, and Smiley. We
What is it called again?
It's called Hook, Line, and Smiley.
Hook, line, and smiley.
Yeah, yeah, and it's we put out 51 podcasts last year. So we took a break over Christmas because it's the holidays, and I'd never want to do anything to pull people away from their families during the holidays. Because I'd feel terrible if I was putting on like a you know podcast or a live show or something during the holidays where it would take people away from their families. Like, wouldn't you
Well,
feel terrible doing that?
not knowing that the kind of shows that I give them around Christmas is their gift.
Yeah, I'm cheap too, Naz. I'm with you. I don't know what else to give other people. But no, she is very quick-witted, very funny. That's kind of one of the first things that attracted me to her, because she's beautiful, but she doesn't rely on that. Is that too mean to say? Like,
No, no, no. I know what you're saying.
she's gorgeous and just funny, like really funny. And she's always had a real appreciation for comedy and stuff. So yeah, she's good. I think she's the second best host on our podcast.
Now, now this is on Google and everything. There's comedy has its what do you call it? Pressure on your marriage in the first marriage,
Yeah.
and and you were single for a while, touring, doing single events, and what was that? What was that like? Having because you had to raise your boys yourself.
Yeah. So again, if people don't know, I was married for 18 years. Then we had a huge fight. It's kind of my fault. I didn't like her rich boyfriend.
Oh,
So she was gone. And then I was single. Yeah. And I had three boys, had three, Coulter, Trent, and Xander. And I was a single dad for a long time. And
what was that like?
it was kind of a blessing, honestly, of like, because nobody saw this coming. Nobody saw this, like I
Right.
should have seen signs. Like, we were vacationing with these people and hanging out with them all the time. And I should have probably, but you just never think it would happen to you, kind of thing. And
Mm.
so all of a sudden, the floor in my world, my sturdy foundation floor, it felt like it just all crumbled out from under me. And honestly, like, my boys and I kind of circled the wagons and just loved on each other. And the house became very much a frat house. And we had, I didn't think it was that bad, but when my wife moved in, I've since married, and so when she moved in, I became aware that my house was a little different than other houses. Not everybody has a ping pong table in the living room and a shopping cart, and some other things that I thought was natural decor. But it was kind of a bittersweet thing. Me and the boys were going through a lot of tragedy, dealing with a lot of trust issues, and
Mm.
just uncertainty of the future. But we also became very, very close with each other. And we, you kind of, I think, a lesson that we learned, you always hear about God's unconditional love, about no matter what. But when you're really in the depths of the fire, so to speak, and you're relying on each other, man, you have a lot of grace for each other. You truly have unconditional love for each other, to help each other get through whatever it is that you're going through. And so, there was a lot of it obviously was a really bad thing, but there was a lot of glimmer and hope. One of the things, I actually talked about this on stage, but I grew up a Christian, and I'd read the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego forever.
Mm.
And I always thought it was a cool story, that God would get you through anything, blah, blah, blah. And I'm saying blah, 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 meaning like, that's how I read it. Like, of course God gets you through anything, but I'd never really struggled with anything before. Like, I'd never had any, like, never really dealt with a lot of tragedy or, betrayal or anything. And then all of a sudden, my kids and I felt like we were in the fire, just like that. And I was reading that story one time to my kids, and I just stopped, because I'd never focused on the part that God saved them in the fire and not actually from the fire. And that
Mm.
had never resonated with me, because I'd really never been in the fire. Had a great childhood, loved, school, loved college, started this dream job that I'd never even dreamed of, but it became my dream job to do stand up, and was getting a tour and, make people laugh, tell them about Jesus. And, it was just, everything was just falling into place. It just seemed like I was really having a great life. And then all of a sudden, I felt like I fell in the fire. And
Mm.
it's cool to look back now. I don't want to make it sound like I was this really strong Christian, because I made really bad decisions, and had doubt, and I let anger take over and all that. But now I can look back at it and be like, oh, God was with me here. God was with me and my boys here. Ironically, we're doing this. I know you're going to put this podcast out later, but we're filming this live on 12/29, and
Mm.
Facebook just sent me. You know how whenever you log on to Facebook and it says this
Yeah,
is your
memory.
memory. Well, 5 years ago, it was all just starting. And so somebody heard that me and my boys were going through this, and they had a snow cabin in New Mexico, Cloudcroft. And so they said, hey, you can use our snow cabin if you want to take the boys and get them, just get them away and kind of regroup and everything. And I was like, oh, that sounds awesome. Because my kids love water skiing, but they never snow skied, and they wanted to. And so I booked the flights, and then a couple of weeks before, I called this guy and I was like, hey, what do we need to know? And he was telling me all the stuff to do in town, and I was like, well, we're not even going to do that. We're just going to ski. And he goes, oh, they haven't had snow in 5 years. And I was like, well, that would have been good to know. And so and it's still a blessing. It was still a blessing. And
Right.
so I have to go that night. I go up to my kids' rooms, and I tell my youngest Xander, and I tell all three of the boys, but when I got to Xander, I was like, hey, buddy, I know we talked about snow skiing and all this, but they haven't had snow in 5 years. So it's still going to be a fun trip. We're going to fly on a plane. We'll get to do it. And man, the faith in this kid, he looked at me and he goes, no problem. I'll pray about it. And I was like, what? And so for 2 weeks, he prayed fervently for snow.
Mm.
The day before we left, the Cloudcroft got so much snow that we couldn't actually make it to the cabin. I actually had to cash in my Hampton Inn,
Points.
Hilton points. They had a Hampton Inn there, and so we got there, and because of the snow, there was only one other family in that Hampton Inn. So for a whole week, and they had an indoor pool, and so we stayed at this Hampton Inn. We were able to get to the ski lifts there. We snowed all week. We would come back to this what seemed like a private hotel,
Hotel.
and we would get in the heated pool, and we had such a great time. Well, Facebook today popped up and said, this is your memory from 5 years ago. And I did
Oh.
get to sit there, and it was kind of a look back on things like, oh, God's got us. God's definitely got us.
Have you ever got to thinking like, oh, maybe it was my fault. I've been traveling a lot. I've been focusing because being a comedian, being an artist on the road, really a lot of times you are, you have to put a lot of energy and focus on that. I mean, I'm not.
Yeah, I've thought over and over. I've tried to get answers. You know, yeah, I don't know, because it was a pretty good system. I would only do I only did about 95 shows a year. Like, I really tried to cap it so that I was home more than most husbands and fathers. So I wouldn't take too many shows. I would try to do a lot of my shows in the summer when my family could travel with me. So I don't think that was ever an issue.
Mm.
You know, I don't know, maybe if I would have made more money, but I don't know.
No,
Yeah,
Mm,
but for a long time, whenever I would get the kids to bed, and I couldn't sleep for months. I couldn't sleep. And
uh,
I would crawl in bed, and I'd just be thinking, okay, what did I do? What could I have done? So yeah, you definitely have those doubts and things like that creep up. But yeah, I just,
and when you met your wife now, how did the boys react to her?
they were very excited at first, because they wanted me to be happy. In fact, they were kind of encouraging me, especially my oldest son. My oldest son kind of knew what all was going on, and he was a little more uh, aware of everything. And so, he was always telling me, like, Dad, you should date. You need to be happy. You deserve to be happy. It was weird because you know he was one of the first ones to tell me that I should date. And at the time I wasn't even thinking about it, because,
Mm.
I mean, me, I was so faithful, and I'm faithful in every relationship. Like, when I hang out with my pastor, I don't look at other pastors. So it was just, I don't. You're looking shocked. I
You
don't.
know, I am shocked because I heard about you and pastors.
No,
Like
no, I'm not
you're
sitting there
always
going,
there's always an associate pastor in mind when you're with the senior pastor talking to him and praying with them. There's always
no, I've never sat there and
no.
been like, oh, I wonder what his sermon's like. No, I'm focused on the pastor I'm with. So we yeah,
Oh,
so they were excited and stuff. There was a big adjustment. So she has two kids,
mm,
which actually is kind of a cool story because when I first talked to her, I didn't know she mentioned that she had kids, and I was like, "How many kids do you have?" And we had our first phone call was a 6 hour phone call that we didn't plan, but we couldn't get off the phone with each other. And she was like, and she mentioned the kids toward the end of the 6 hours, and I was like, "How many kids do you have?" And already I was kind of I wasn't thinking that I was going to marry her or anything like that, but I was thinking like, "Oh, she's cool." And she was like, I have two kids. And I can't believe I said this, but I was like, I don't know if I want more kids. And she said a beautiful, I know that's horrible, but she said, two more kids is two more opportunities to love and to be loved. And I was like, oh, that's beautiful. Like this girl has a
mm.
heart for Jesus. And then she was like, how many kids do you have? And I said three, and we got disconnected. But but I was able to get her back on the phone. So they were very excited at first. Sarah's funny. She's definitely a boy mom. She can throw the football like crazy, like all these things that she just kept surprising us of
Mm,
how like perfect she was for the Smiley boys. There is a big adjustment in blending families. She has two boys. They've had completely different lifestyles and how they grew up, different from my boys. And my boys are very outdoors, catching snakes, and that's a we're big into hunting and all this kind of stuff. And so there was a little bit of like trying to blend the families, and also figuring out like they loved her coming in, but then there's new rules, and we're changing stuff around the house, and you can't like clean a deer in the living room, some crazy rules like that. So there was some adjustments to it, but man, it's so great. Like the kids really, really have welcomed her in. That's a good question, because that is one of the things that we address on the podcast, our podcast, Hook, Line, and Smiley, a lot is the difficulty of blending a family together, because there's just it's every single day. It's not like you fix it and then you move on. You may fix the one little situation, but ultimately it's constant. It's like a car. You're constantly tuning it and making sure you filling it with gas so it can get to the destination that you're headed to.
that's a good analogy. Now, how are you and your family coping with the pandemic?
Um, it's pretty good. My parents order stuff for me to Uber Eats deliver, which helps make me money. No, that's not true. Yeah, we're dealing with it pretty well. Like I said, God continues to bless us. So I was doing our Hook, Line, and Smiley podcast. For years. I've written for Focus on the Family for their junior high magazine called
Yes,
Club.
I remember that.
Yeah. Well, so I created this character called Average Boy years ago, and I wrote an article for their magazine. It was like a humor article about the story was an actual true story of me going back to school and getting a really bad haircut in middle school. But when I wrote that first article, I thought of a cell phone joke that I thought was really funny and fit within that. Well, I realized that I couldn't make that story about me and have the cell phone joke in it because I didn't have cell phones back then. So I just created a character and just called him Average Boy, just for a generic thing. I thought it'd be one article, and kids started writing in saying that they wanted more Average Boy stories. They actually were like, let this kid write more stories. So they even thought it was a kid. So I started writing every single month. That the character became big. Uh, Focus on the Family let me write two comedy/devotional books for middle school kids. And so those came out, those did really well. I tell you all that to say, like, it's crazy how something that happened way in the past, how God's like, ooh, I can't wait for him to see how I'm going to use that later on. So in March, all my shows had canceled. And so I had no income coming in. And previously, like starting in the mid-December of 2018, Focus on the Family asked me if I would write and perform an Average Boy podcast just to see if there was interest in families listening to a podcast of Average Boy that is short, like about 20 minutes long, that's funny, but also has some spiritual encouragement at the end. And I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't foresee this, COVID thing. And so I was like, yeah, if I have time. And so I wrote some scripts, recorded them, put them out, and it did really well. So right when all my shows canceled, this Average Boy podcast that I just did for free, kind of on the side, it started hitting really big. It was getting a ton of downloads. And so they came back to me in March, kind of the beginning of April, and was like, man, this is going great. We'd like to actually pay you for doing this. And we're going to put out 52 podcasts for families to listen to with their kids. They greenlit me for a third Average Boy book, which I have 4 more chapters left to finish up the book.
Wow.
That's what I've been writing on. But all of that came in, which really helped float us. And then, all kidding aside, I've been Uber Eats driving. My wife teaches at a private school. All these little things just she got tutoring jobs,
Mm.
just kind of out of the blue. Word was getting out of what a good teacher she was. And so parents started contacting her about tutoring. So it's just so great how I really feel like God was giving us, here's your manna for this month. Here's to take care of these bills and stuff. So that's how we're getting through it, is just looking up and being like, all right, just, guide us around and give us the manna that you want us to have. And we'll be grateful and, ready for whatever adventure you want to have for us.
Amen. Now, as we're closing this podcast, how how can you encourage people? What kind of encouragement do you have for people watching and listening?
Well, that's a good question, Naz. One, and this really dawned on me early on, so I feel like I've been able to take advantage of this, but we've always said, oh man, whenever, if things slow down, I'm going to do this. Or if things, if I wasn't so busy, I would be able to do this. Well, all of a sudden, at least in Texas, starting in March, everything went on hold. So
Mhm.
we had time to invest in our kids. We had time to invest in our marriage. We had time to, you know, again, I'm really big into hunting, and it provides for my family. And so like my wife and I redid my deer stand for this season. I shouldn't have let her like dictate everything. I think the wind chimes were a really bad idea. Because it's way too noisy. But I think we got to do all these projects that we kept saying, like, oh, all of a sudden I'm home every weekend. And so we
Mhm.
have time to invest more in our church group, our Sunday school classes, and the couples around our neighborhood that we were like, man, I wish we could, get to know them a little better. And so that's one of the encouragements. The world's kind of on hold. I know it's kind of starting back up and all that, but like we've had a big chunk of time where we can actually like realize what is important. It goes back to my financial thing. What do you really need? Like what is really important in your life? That's what you need to invest your time in. And while a lot of this is on hold and people aren't out traveling and shopping and doing all that kind of stuff, my wife is. She hadn't quit shopping at all. But we'll get to prayer requests later. But I think we need to invest in each other. We're built for community, and now's a great time to invest. And a lot of people, I've got friends that I haven't heard from in a long time, and they can text me because they have something to say. Like, hey, how are you doing during the quarantine? Or hey, will you be on my Facebook Live tomorrow night? Like they're coming up with things, to interact. And I think we need to do that. I think we need to reach out and just invest in each other's lives more. Because again, we are built for community. The other encouragement I would give, and I can say this having gone through, a terrible divorce and broken marriage and all this kind of stuff, I learned this lesson then. Nothing surprises God at all.
Mm.
So when I was sitting at night going, what is going on? How can this be, happen? It destroyed 2 families in our church. Like I had a lot of like, how could you let this happen? How could you? Well, one, he doesn't make it happen. Like people make bad choices.
Right.
And then it manifests itself into bad situations that sometimes bad decisions that other people make around you affects you. And so I think it's important to remember that nothing that happens surprises God, though. and that he's in control. And when you can realize that, like no matter what, as long as we're trying to make good decisions and we're trying to keep our eyes focused on Christ, he is going to truly be that light that guides us through the darkest times in life. And so if we realize that none of this is surprising, then I think it'll kind of calm us down and maybe give us a little bit of confidence to, get up and go and continue to do what we need to do to get through all this.
That's a great question. Now, you have products. You still, I mean, just because we're not performing, we still have products to sell. Uh, what kind of t-shirts do you have that you're,
Oh,
that this one says,
I didn't realize I did this, but I do have the expressions of COVID t-shirt that is available. And I've got, I am a big advocate of reading the Bible. My grandmother actually taught me that when I was young. She was like, read the Bible when you're young. It makes me mad that young kids never read the Bible and elderly people are reading it like crazy because it's like they're trying to cram for a final. So I've always read the Bible, and it bothers me that people they misquote Jesus all the time. I had a neighbor come up one time and he was like, yeah, it's like Jesus said, with great power comes great responsibility.
what?
And, yeah, I'm glad you're laughing. That means you're cramming for your final. I didn't even let him off the hook. I was like, is that in first or second Spider-Man? But so one of my shirts, it's in the back here. One of my shirts just has a drawing of Jesus, and it just says, I never said that, because he gets misquoted all the time. And here's the truth of it. How can we live out what Jesus said if we don't know what he said? So the shirt's funny. I like that, but it makes a better message, and it's a great conversation starter. I also have a shirt that actually is good for you, Naz. It says, I'm not as random as you think I'd squirrel. So those are available there at bobsmiley.com. And because it is, like, I know it's after Christmas, but I'm going to offer something to your listeners, your viewers. Sure. Right now, if they'll go to bobsmiley.com, click on the store, each listener or viewer can purchase one item or more.
Are you serious? How long is this offer going to be?
Until the rapture.
Oh, okay. That's so. Hurry up, people! If you heard, let me repeat the offer just to affirm it's true. If you go to bobsmiley.com right now and to go to his store, you can buy one item or more.
Yeah.
And he will let you do that.
Yeah. And just like after my Dry Bar comedy special, I'm going to sit back and wait for the phone.
Yeah,
and
I'm ordering right now.
In.
Well, Bob, thank you so much. And if people who are watching or listening, and I know some people listen a year from now or something, Bob is a very funny man. He can bring the comedy in a very professional way. Plus, he brings Jesus to it too. So also, if you want to check Focus on the Family and check Average Man, that's Average Boy.
Yeah.
Average Boy. That's Bob Smiley. So, Bob, thank you so much for taking the time.
Naz, it is like, I really did look at all the comics that you had on, and I was like, why hadn't he had me on? And then I realized, like, oh, you're having me on your 200th special, like your 200th episode. And that means
of that,
so much to me.
What are you doing on New Year's Eve?
I'm kissing my wife. What?
Okay. What about, okay, we're doing our New Year's Eve, and this is live, and I'm taking the chance. New Year's Eve, we're doing the Live with Naz, which we do every weeknight at 8:30 p.m. Pacific time. What we're going to do on New Year's Eve is we're going to stay from 8:30 until midnight Pacific time, so we make sure everybody celebrates their Christmas in different time zones. If you can, would you love to virtually Zoom and do some comedy for some of them are your fans?
I would love that. Let me just check with my wife. Say I'm busy. Hey, what are we doing New Year's? Can I do Naz's show?
You're busy.
No, louder.
You're busy.
A little bit louder.
You're really busy.
I'm really busy, Naz.
Okay, it's okay. All right. Well, that's $1,000 I'm saving.
Like such a dejected puppy.
What?
You look like a dejected puppy.
I do. Is that your wife really in the background?
Yeah. Hey, baby, say something else so they know you're real.
No, she's not real.
Don't say you're pretend. That she really is here. I really did get away. No, I will try. We're gonna be out at her parents' farm.
Oh, okay.
So
It's a
if
farm. That's
the
Wi-Fi is
Wi-Fi
hard.
is a little
If
iffy, but if I can I just text you and like before
yes,
to get all the
if you
information and stuff?
yes, no
Okay.
problem. Thank you so much for your time. Love you, man, and thank you for what you do. Hopefully, we get to work together. I know we will. We'll get to work together again in the near future. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, and happy New Year, Bob.
You too, man. Love you, Nas.
Love you too. And for you guys watching, you know what? If you are watching this live on the 31st, which is in 2 days, we're going to do a live with Naz, episode number 200. And we're going to go from 8:30 p.m. Pacific time till midnight. So going to have a bunch of comedians and other stuff, other surprises. So join us on this page, Comedian Nazareth on Facebook. Love you guys. Thank you so much. And have a great
This
day.
is this is the awkward part. How do I leave here?
You
I don't want
can't.
it to
That's a
be
problem.
awkward,
No, as long as
but
people are buying from bobsmiley.com, they cannot leave.
you're the best. I'll see you, bud. Bye.
Thanks, bud. Take care.